Let's look back on last season. It was important for all the clubs in the 12 divisions to avoid those three at the bottom who got relegated. That was obviously the first priority. But you did a lot better than that.
Yeah, and look, I think our primary goal was always to be a Premiership team coming into this season. And we set ourselves that stretch goal of top four. We weren't able to meet that stretch goal, but we were really chuffed to give ourselves another opportunity to do it this year.
Because you were in the top half at the end of the day, so were all the border teams, in fact, which was great. You know, you had great local competition with Selkirk and Hawick, and Kelso weren't far behind. They managed to avoid the relegation as well. So to get 4 border sides in the top 10 this season for an area which is punching way above its weight is fantastic.
I think so, and I don't think we say enough about that. You know, there's a real saturation of clubs down here, and for us to have, you know, I think what is it? It's 9 high schools that feed 8 clubs, and of those 8 clubs, 4 of them are Premiership clubs, 2 of them are National 1 clubs, and you know, Peebles were up there until last season, and they got relegated again. And you know, that's with a similar population base to, you know, where some clubs have 13 high schools feeding into it. And if you look along the squad lists, all these clubs, you know, border sides we're producing players, and you know, I just think we maybe need to give ourselves more of a pat on the back than we do, and maybe look at the positives instead.
Because, I mean, of the 8 clubs, the big 8 who are playing national rugby, 7 of them avoided relegation. Peebles very nearly did it. But as you say, to get 7 of the 8 still doing very, very well last season in terms of, you know, avoiding that trapdoor was fantastic.
Yeah, I think so. And I think with the re-addition of the South again this year, or you know, that's what the plan is anyway, that it just gives our guys a little bit more to look out for. And you know, I know, like, in that Super 6 era, you know, the South were pretty dominant. I think we got a couple off the back of that, and I just think it's really important to have local players having something else to strive for, and I think the red and white hoops are definitely the way to go for it.
And looking back at last season, obviously you finished, as I say, in the top 6. There were some really, really good results in there. I mean, obviously we immediately think of the Curry double, putting 40 points on them here and winning by a point at Millennium Park early in the season. That raised a few eyebrows.
It's an interesting psychology, isn't it? Like, more so within our group than in anything else. We beat Kelso at home, but we probably shouldn't have beat them. And if we hadn't won that game, we would never have beat any border sides. So we understand where our sticking point is, and we've identified the fact that we need to get better at, you know, playing that niggly game, and you know, get a little bit better at bringing flow and rhythm and momentum back into our game when it slows down. We're really looking forward to the season, but we understand the challenges that we need to go after. Specifically, if we had won all our games against border opposition, we would have been in the top 4. But again, we're still unsure of the Curry results. It's maybe the psychology behind not really seeing them as a top 4 side. You know, they weren't a Super Series team. But look, if we can replicate either of those performances going into this season, especially against Curry, then we'd be delighted with that.
Looking at your top teams like Ayr and Heriots and Watsonians, and knowing that you've got to get points to survive first and foremost, what happens? Because I think last year we saw it with Musselburgh as well. They put out not a B side, but they rested their best players for the games that were really, really important down below. When it came to the Ayers, and it was almost as if psychologically they said, well, we're not going to get much out of this. Let's not injure any players. What is the psychology behind that?
I don't think that psychology comes into play with us. You know, as part of our DNA, we're always attacking. I think Musselburgh had their own worries to go at. You know, they essentially were relegated at November, and you know, they had bigger fish to fry than going away to Milbray. And look, Ayr are a great team. Their contact skills are outstanding, and they're just big human beings. So, like, how do you go and beat them guys? Because it's going to require us to be really disciplined tactically, but then we also need to make sure that we've worked really hard in the summer to pack on a bit of size so we can try and match that. And you know, your Watsonians and your Heriots, it's going to be a little bit of an unknown, because they're losing key players, real experienced players, and it'll be difficult to replace that sort of experience in a squad. So look, we don't know. Our goal is always going to be top 4. If we make it absolutely magic. If we don't, then look, the league restarts the year after. We'll just go again.
And of course, I mean, people, the punters, if you like, they're looking at the Premiership this year and they're thinking, oh yes, there's the big three there, and Curry is usually ranked in fourth place, and of course they were fourth last year. Is it really a case at the moment, because of this divide, everyone is really going to try and get into that fourth spot?
I think so. Yeah, 100%. I think so. And we'll look at games like Heriots at home here, where we feel we should have, at least had a try-scoring bonus and a losing bonus point out of that. We played pretty well. And then we went away up to Watsonians, where the ball and play time was huge. It was about 43 minutes, and both teams were gassed at the end of it. But up until that last 5 minutes, we were in the game, and we probably could have and should have come away with more. So look, we know that we're capable of it, and we know that we've got the players. We've strengthened our squad. We've recruited in the areas that we really felt we needed to, and look, I'm pretty confident in saying that our target's top four, and if we can stay relatively injury free, especially after the run we had last year, then we've got a good shot at it.
I mentioned Melrose big double against Curry, which was outstanding. We can also mention Kelso's double over Watsonians as well, which was also outstanding. So on the day, you can be very, very competitive. Teams like, Kelso and Melrose and Hoyk, you can go up there and give teams a run for the money. Yeah,
it's funny. I think, certain teams attack in a way that suits defences. We feel that the way that Curry attacked, it really suited us. They played a lot through their forwards, and they kicked out with their half a lot. And key to our game is that we've got a lot of possession, and Curry gave us plenty of that. And look, up there they hit the post with the last play of the game, and that gave us the win. But then down here, it's probably the best performance I've seen since I've been involved at Melrose since 2021. So we're bloody excited. We're really, really excited for the season. And tonight is our first session back. We gave the guys an extra couple of weeks off as to what they would usually have, and the understanding that look, we commit to 3 days a week and we go hard after it. We've got Peebles on the 9th of August. We've got Jed on the 16th, which double up as border league games, just so that we're not having to fit them in later in the season. And look, as far as I can tell at the moment, the guys are dialed in and they're really excited. It's just how us as a coaching group and as a player group, ride the highs and the lows and make sure that we come at everything for a place of care and love rather than, fear.
Last season you had two Australians, Declan Mulcahy and Goldsborough, of course, as well, Corey Goldsborough, who both were outstanding, I thought.
Yeah.
Are they back this season?
Yeah, they're back this season. They're currently travelling Europe. They were part of the squad that was over in Geneva for us, and then some of the guys went to Nice with them, and then a couple of other guys went to Porto and met them out there, so they're having a great time. They're back in. We've Stuart Hutchison, Alan Ferry, and Gavin Wood, Sander Ramage, and Chris Rogerson are all playing at Southern Districts, which is Goldie and Deck's club. So we're slowly building a strategic partnership with them, and look, we're not in a position where we can go out and recruit financially, so we need to build partnerships and create experiences for players that are going to help us. So we're looking to have a couple of players come across from there when their season's finished. Guys like Declan and Goldie can, they can back. But look, Deck and Goldie, they're going to be here next season, and they're going to be a huge part of our plans. And of course, we want to know who's coming in, who's going out. What can you tell us? Yeah, well, we had a big gym session last night. A couple of the new guys that we had along, Ollie Furness. He's been on the McPhail scholarship. He's a Peebles lad, and he's from that conveyor belt that Peebles keep churning out. We've got Heno Bo, a back row player that's coming out with Loretto. He looks a physical guy. Callum Ram, so he was playing at Boroughmuir and Boroughmuir Bears. His experience is going to be so key for us. He's a guy that can cover 10, centre, fullback, and wing, and then we're really lucky to have Rowan Frostwick join the club. So we're looking forward to, again, the experience that he can bring to us from his time in Pro Rugby and Shoot Shield. And Rory Campbell's coming back. Yeah, Rory Campbell. Sorry, I didn't mean to forget about Roo. He's a Melrose boy, and again, he really fits the mould of how we want to play the game. He's great in the air. He's a really dynamic ball carrier. And look, he'll say himself that he's looking to put in a bit of weight and a bit of physicality, and those are probably his off-field habits that we need to work at. But we're really excited to have him back in the mix.
Well, of course, we've had some beautiful sunshine over the last few days. As we're talking at the moment, the heavens have opened. Lovely for them to start or restart their training process in this sort of typical conditions that they'll be getting later on.
Yeah, well, I think the boys will probably prefer to have it a little bit damp. There's a lot of down and ups and a lot of running tonight, so rather than having skint knees for the artificial pitch, they'll slide in it a wee bit more. But look, there'll be big numbers here tonight, and the guys are just ready to get fired into it.
I was going to ask you about the pitch as well, because Melrose players obviously have the benefit of playing on the artificial surface all the time, but they're not immune from the old scrapes and scratches either.
Not scrapes and scratches. I think we've built a bit of robustness around joint, knee and ankle injuries. We don't get very many of them. We find that visiting teams do. Especially ones visiting teams who don't have access to a 4G pitch to play on. The scrapes are pretty bad, especially when the sun's been out and the pitch hasn't been watered. But look, we've worked pretty hard with Live Borders to make sure that there's systems in place to make sure that the pitch it's got a lot of water in it before we play, especially on the hot days. Our guys are pretty proactive around using Hypofix. Our medical team they've got that in bundles, and that's the stuff that you put over your elbows and your knees. And I think after a little while, there starts to become a pattern of which areas get burned the most for you based on your tackle technique or the way that you like to fall. And the guys they know where to stick the stuff. So that's little tips for anyone coming to visit us.
Now, this is the second season you've been joint head coach with Scott White. Scott's away at the moment on holiday, a well-deserved break for him. How does that work out from your point of view? Because people see head coaches, someone has to have the final say, presumably. How does it all work? Yeah,
well, we have final says on different things. So, week to week that might change. So, Scotty has the final say on a selection call. Like we'll get some pretty deep debates. And then if it comes to the last one and he's got a different opinion from me, then I'm probably the one that's going to suffer there unless my argument can be bang on. I do the planning, the coach development side of things, and the analysis. My role on a week to week is I'll oversee training while Scotty coaches the attack. And yeah, look, it works really well. He's the guy that does all the media, so it feels a bit strange coming and doing media again because I quite like him doing it. So overall, like my job is to, when we've got a big coaching team, Craig Greer's leading our forwards, Robbie Brown assists him with the forwards, and Zen is stepping into a player coach role there. Richard Taylor delivers our S&C and he's an assistant coach as well. Jerry Brett, he leads on skills and assists with attack. Dougie Dodds, he's going to lead the Storm this season, and Callum Anderson is going to lead the Sevens. So we've all got really, distinct areas of where we're going to lead on, and my job's to make sure that everybody's got what they need, and that we can have pretty robust conversations around what we need to do better. Because a lot of the time, it's only our players that we analyse, and our coaches, this season going forward, especially they're going to get filmed. They'll have a microphone on them, and we'll analyse their performance as much as we analyse the players, because I think it's really important that the players understand that our guys they're here to get better as well. Like, nobody's a finished article, and the tighter and more connected that we can get and more aligned that we can get as a coaching group, then I think our players are going to see that, and they're going to thrive off that, especially if what we're delivering is as professional as it can be.
What about the season structure now? We're back to 10 teams again, which I think is universally, everyone's quite pleased at that. 10 team leagues right the way across the 5 divisions. Are you reasonably happy with the club structure now? Because obviously we had the Super 6 and there was lots of changes. Do you think this is here to stay?
I don't think it matters dropping down to a 10 team league if we're going to chuck in a Scottish Cup as well.
Are we though?
We don't know that yet. We've not been told here or there, and I think we go with collective locally. If all the border sides decide that they want to be part of that as well as the border league, then we're happy to do that. We've accounted for that by having our Peebles and our Jed games in August as border league games and pre-season friendlies. But look, I'm desperate for our guys to play less rugby, like far less rugby. one, it'll allow them to go and do other things, and two, just the wear and tear on their body. Like week 5 in the league, we've got a player welfare break. And my worry would be is that if we fill those international breaks in and the inter-district breaks with cup fixtures, then our guys are just going to burn out. And look, especially locally, not so much with us, but locally where teams are playing with a smaller and smaller player pool, and you really put your squad under pressure, and you put a lot of your experienced players under pressure by not forcing them to play, but they feel obliged to make sure that they turn out for the club. So look, I would prefer not to be in there, just for not a player welfare thing, but just to give our guys a break. But look, whatever we decide as a collective, then we'll go after it. It's something else to have a go at winning. All of us are just striving to have real positive business models and real thriving clubs, and any decision that we make or any question that comes up for us is it needs to be based around, will it make the community proud? And you look from 4 years ago to now, Melrose is a different beast in terms of how we're supported and how the community get behind us, and like lots has changed since then. We had the big reset with the Southern Knights stopping, and look, we're in a really good place, and Doug Crawford's doing a brilliant job of not just getting Melrose to buy in, but there's an understanding that Lauder, Bozels, Newtown, Earlston, and a lot of Tweed Bank now as well is coming this way, and we want to make sure that we've got something for everything, something for everybody here.
Would you like to see whoever finishes the top of the league actually crowned champions, and then maybe another competition after that? Would that solve problems? Because we know we're always looking at dead rubbers, particularly with 10-team seasons.
Yeah, so look, I think my opinion on this as well. If I was Ayr, I would just want to win the league and that'd be done. But because I'm not Ayr, I want to make sure that I've got a way to motivate my players throughout the year. So look, just as an example, if we are in December and Ayr are 20 points ahead of everybody else, and they're definitely going to win the league, then how do you motivate players that aren't being financially rewarded for playing? They're coming out because they love their club. The way that I would do it is I would reward the winner with as sort of minor premierships like they do in the NRL. Then those guys are guaranteed a home premiership final. I would have third and fourth playoff for the right to play against second place, and then second and the winner of that would move the way into the final. So there has to be, your winner can't just play the same amount of games as your team that played fourth. They should be directly into the final, and there's downsides to that where they don't get to play a game for maybe 2-3 weeks. But look, the way that the scheduling is, it's going to happen anyway. I just think the team that wins it should be rewarded a little bit more with a guaranteed home final, and then have the teams that scrape through battling that a little bit more. And I think we can take a lot from the likes of AFL and NRL, like these Aussie competitions that they really reward the top teams and give those below them an opportunity by probably more effort.
I think that's my main problem is the fact that you're actually crowning Scottish champions via a playoff system. I actually love playoffs. I used to love the 9th versus 2nd, for instance. We've seen some great ding-dongs in the past with Hoyk involved with Embrackes and other teams as well. Hoyk Dundee famously, 39-38. Which does keep the interest going. But also, when it comes to dead rubbers as well, as you mentioned, if one team is way ahead, it's very difficult to get an incentive, unless you did something like 1st against 8th, 2nd against 7th, in which case you're going right to the end of the league trying to get your best ranking for a further competition. Yeah,
I think so. And I think just the way that people are nowadays and how society is, I think we need to understand how to motivate people and how to keep people engaged. And again, I'm glad we've went down to a 10-team league. Like 18 games, it sounds like a lot to be honest, but 18 games is a lot. And by the time you get to 14 games, a lot of these guys, the only break they're getting is when they're injured. So, we don't want it to run that way, but I think there should be a reward for top 4. And then more so than anything, a real reward for the team that finishes top of the league.
You mentioned earlier, Inter-District Championship
Yep.
is back. We're very, very pleased about that. It's kind of a bit of a compromise, really. I know that Glasgow and other clubs wanted it later on.
Yep.
Edinburgh in the south particularly wanted it in the old traditional time slot of January. So it's a bit of a mixture, but everyone is playing each other. And you've been involved with the south at management level as well, coaching level. Great to have it back.
Yeah, I think so. I think your best players need pushed on, and I think it's a great way for us to bridge the gap between professional rugby and club rugby now that Super 6 isn't a thing, Super Series isn't a thing. Look, I love my time involved there. It was great getting to know the guys from other clubs. It was great, having different opinions on playing style and how they approach this, and working with different coaches. So look, I think it's a real bonus for our calendar to have that back in.
So finally, we talk about Melrose this season. Your first up is Heriots.
Yep.
We remember what happened last year. It was a very close game. Heriots just went away at the end and got the points. But that's going to be our first featured game, so we're really looking
Brilliant.
forward to that. Melrose against Heriots, and you'll certainly be wanting to start with a bang.
Yeah, 30.1.
Is that your prediction?
Yeah.
But it is important, isn't it, to get a good start?
Yeah, I think so. And I think the momentum that we'll hopefully have going into that point, especially with a lot of the new boys bringing their own energy to it and bringing competition to the team, which I think we lacked. Injuries and probably a bit of competence and ability, and a bit of fear of the unknown for us meant that we couldn't do a huge amount of contact at training. We had a lot of boys on the sideline. We lost a lot of boys within pre-season. So when the 23rd of August comes, I think we'll have had a 6-week pre-season, and we feel that that'll be the sweet spot for us to go into the Heriots game firing.
And having two competitive games, as you mentioned,
Yeah.
in the Border League, that's got to be a big plus.
Look, I think for us to make top 4, we need to beat the other border sides, and if we didn't target winning the Border League, then it would be silly of us, because one can lead to the other. It has been a real sticking point for us ever since I've been involved at Melrose. Is we just really struggle to play against other border sides. So we think we've remedied that, and we think we've fixed our mindset going into that. So watch this space, I guess.
And just finally, and we mentioned earlier on about the gulf, if you like, or perceived gulf.
Yep.
With Ayers and Heriots and Watsonians and others as well, possibly Curry getting that way as well. How do we possibly close the gap in the next 5 years? What do we have to do to be talked about in the same breath?
S&C. Your off-field small jobs. So, our guys just turning up on a Tuesday and a Thursday, and expecting it to happen on a Saturday, because your game day is it's a reality of your training week, and we are slowly dripping that into our guys around. Look, your recovery is really important. Your S&C is really important. The education piece of your game is really important. Like how much are you watching your game? How much are you watching the opposition's game? Are you engaging in the analysis and the feedback that you've been given? And I think for a lot of teams, having coachable players is really important as well. So how many players are actually really open to feedback, and how do they action that feedback? And for us, we've taken a real a sort of coach hard approach, where most of the stuff's going to be on the hoof, but none of it's going to come as a surprise to anybody, because it'll just be constantly dripped in. And all of our players have engaged in a sort of pre-season survey that will essentially give themselves an IDP. So what's their weapon, what's their work on, and where are they making time in their week to work on both their weapon and their work on, and who do they need for that? And so look, while I said S&C, and I don't want to put it all on players, because they've got a huge responsibility to make sure that they get their off-field right to get their on-field right. But I think coaching is a big one for us. And again, if you've got the best players in the country, then it's not gonna make a difference what your coaches are like. But there's a huge cultural piece for us going into this season that needs to get better, and the guys are all bought into that so far. How that plays out, it's to be confirmed. But I'm really looking forward to our themes, the things we're going after, the way we're trying to play the game, and most of all, the energy that the guys coming in are going to give us. look, we're really hopeful in the draft that we'll get Dylan Coburn back, who's signed for Glasgow Warriors, and Ben White, who signed for Edinburgh. Like, these guys are going to be so valuable to us if we can get them back on Dylan for a player of origin, and Ben's still living over there, so we're hopeful that we'll get him as well.
Well, it's a long season ahead of 10 months or so. We wish you all the best, and no doubt we'll be catching up with you throughout the season.
Thanks, Stuart. Cheers.